Hello and welcome to Press TV News Analysis. I'm Kavitach Vaib. The recent U.S. debt plan, which has cleared both the House and Senate, would raise the debt ceiling by at least $2.4 trillion and cut spending of roughly $2.1 trillion over 10 years. But is a solution to the debt limit a solution to U.S.'s economic woes? Critics are saying that the Budget Control Act passed by a few days ago cuts billions of dollars from crucial domestic programs while failing to close tax loopholes for the rich and corporations. They argue that average and the working class Americans are the main losers of the debt deal. This as several countries have criticized the debt ceiling. China has even downgraded the U.S.'s credit rating.
Lawmakers in much of America may be breathing a sigh of relief that Washington at least temporarily avoided a catastrophe by raising the debt ceiling and averting a default. But countries that have lent the U.S. trillions of dollars are reacting skeptically to news of the deal, which calls for cutting the national debt by at least $2.1 trillion over a decade. China's ruling party newspaper said the U.S. had merely pushed off debt problems, and Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin said the U.S. is a parasite that is living in debt.
There's always going to be criticism and sniping, and frankly, the U.S. has also sniped at other countries, so we cannot, we don't want to be the pot that calls the kettle black here.
America's creditors remain concerned that the U.S. has not taken the far-reaching steps necessary to restore its financial health and that it could undermine the international financial system. Experts say the debt agreement offers few measures to invigorate the anemic economic recovery.
If taxes go up next year as much as they're currently scheduled to and spending continues to fall, that's going to be a big drag on the economy, and when the economy is already rather weak. So the odds of a double-dip recession have definitely gone up.
Some experts say the number one lesson people around the world are concluding is that the U.S. political system is deeply divided and will have difficulty making choices over the next decade. Many Americans agree.
I think definitely politics has gotten in the way of proper policy.
The dollar remains the global reserve currency and the basis for most transactions. For several years, China, Russia, and other emerging markets have advocated the dollar relinquish its primacy in global markets. Economist Joe Gagnon agrees.
Well, I actually agree with them on that. And I think part of the problem is that they are actually the people who are pushing the dollar up more than anyone, especially China. And so they're sort of guilty of the thing that they're complaining about.
So far, concerns about U.S. financial health are not yet reflected in the market for U.S. Treasury bonds. The government continues to borrow money at extraordinarily low rates.
Frankly, it would be a good thing for the United States if foreigners would stop buying our treasuries. It would actually be good because they'd have no choice but to buy our exports because the dollar would fall and we would be more competitive in the world.
The U.S. Treasury Department said it will sell $72 billion of notes and bonds next week, returning to business as normal after a last-minute hike in the debt limit. Rhonda Pence, Press TV, Washington.
Let's get this started. Let me introduce our guest, Senior Fellow and Vice Chair at the Institute for Policy Studies, Sal Landau, joins us from Berkeley. We have columnist at The Hill, Brent Budowsky, who joins us from Washington. And rounding off the list, financial journalist Cameron Duadu, who joins us from London. Gentlemen, thank you all. First, let me go to you, Brent Budowsky. Many Americans have this perception now that a deal was reached, so now their problems perhaps are solved, that the country can now return to business as usual. Has the deal fixed U.S.'s problems?
No, it barely even began to fix the U.S. problem. I thought it was a bad deal. I wrote that very publicly, and I advised people in the White House and congressional leaders, Democrats, about that. What they should have done is they should have done more budget cutting with tax increases for the wealthy and cuts in some of the health benefits like Medicare for the wealthy. And in the short term, what they should have done is at least spent $200 billion to create jobs right now. What they did in the deal was they actually began cutting spending in the U.S. starting this October 1st. I warned them privately. I've written this publicly. I think that is an epic financial blunder, similar to what happened in 1937 when we were coming out of the depression back then, and they did the same kind of actions then, and we drove the country right back in. So no, I don't believe anybody who is serious in the United States believed that this deal solved anything. It barely began to solve things. It did absolutely nothing to create new jobs, and that is a disaster. It actually cuts some spending starting in a few months, and that is a mistake. And they have to get back to the drawing board, which is, I wrote in my column today in the Hill, in the paper right now, literally, we have to save the nation from an economic reversal or an economic disaster, and the clock is ticking right now. And we're not the only one. Europe has problems continentally, and there are other parts of the world that have similar problems, including Japan and in some ways China.
Right, and you did write also that cutting spending in a no-growth economy will damage the economy more. We're going to get to that in a minute. Let me go to Sal Landau. Sal Landau, there are critics who say the political posturing around the debt ceiling crisis was mostly a distraction from the hard issues that the United States is facing, issues like the U.S. economic decline. So who are the winners and losers of this debt limit deal? I mean, who will benefit most from the deal? The average and working Americans, you think, or the rich Americans and the big corporations?
Well, I think it's very clear that the winners are the billionaires, the oil companies, and the other large corporations who are really going to get at least the same, if not more, than they were before. The losers, of course, are the majority of the American public. And it's not just that they're losers in the sense that they're going to be paying more, way more than their fair share. It's they're losers in another way. It's become quite clear that they're the only people in this country that don't have a lobby. Every single special interest group has a very good lobby that gets what it wants, but the American public has none, and it doesn't get what it wants and needs. Secondly, what this round of so-called talks or negotiations demonstrated is that our political system is in a state of dysfunction. There's one individual that the American people vote for once every 4 years, and that's the President of the United States. And now he is hit by a group of basically extortionists, extreme right-wing Tea Party Republicans who make demands on him, and it's like he agrees. He concedes not everything they want, but some of the things they want. The very fact that he would be in a position to compromise his presidential status in that way shows you how far down our political system has sunk. And I think this is another one of the casualties of our current system. And I agree with my colleague from the Hill newspaper. We are in a very bad situation. Right. Where the Congress of the United States, which I would say is certainly the best Congress money can buy, has refused to tax the wealthiest people in the country. There's a front page story today in the New York Times that says luxury goods are selling better than ever. There's some necklace that's selling for $11,000, and it was on the shelf for just a few minutes before it was sold, and another one replaced it, and it was sold. This is the kind of stupidity that we're in, and I would leave it at this, that this country, or the people who are running this country, are in a state of denial. They are not recognizing priorities, and they're certainly not acting, and they've now sunk into their own definition of reality, which is the equivalent of the ride on the old Egyptian river, denial.
Right, and that's pretty dismal. Cameron Duado, I'd like for you to expand on something that you've actually said before, that the Republicans and Democrats have already done a lot of damage because it looks as if the American politicians are just basically thinking about local politics, but a great deal of the world depends on the U.S. dollar as its reserve currency. Can you expand on that statement that you made recently?
Yes. The fact that the United States is in a mess has left a long trail across the world. This evening, the FTSE in London fell by 3%. That has been duplicated all across Europe. The Chinese are beginning to make noises about America living beyond its means. And in fact, the U.S. within a few weeks will be able to say or boast that it has as much debt as its gross national product. Now, when small countries like Ghana do that, the IMF comes down heavily on them and brings structural adjustment programs to try and get them back into line. But the United States, because it is so powerful and controls everything, is able to borrow as much as it produces. So it is a very serious situation economically. But even more important It is sending a signal to the American people that their Constitution is weak. The founding fathers of the United States believed that there should be coexistence between Congress and the presidency. Now, Congress, through the Tea Party and other elements, all of which are conservative, don't want to take prisoners when it comes to trying to get what they want. So the compromise that is usually observed in America and gives them a bipartisan program in terms of the economy and foreign policy and so forth has completely vanished. How is the United States going to be able to present a serious face to the world if the world knows that the Congress can hold the president prisoner and the president must either force his way or he can't get anything at all that he wants? Mm-hmm. It is a complete subversion of the American system of government as conceived in 1776.
Well, let's look at a comparison that you made, Brent Budowsky, that you felt it was appropriate description. You have called this the debt ceiling deal disaster and said it was reminiscent of Michael Corleone in The Godfather, who said to a senator, "Here's my offer, nothing," in reference to what Republicans said to the president and Democrats, in which, well, the president and Democrats responded, "We accept, give us nothing." Explain that to us and ultimately why you think this was, as you put it, a destructive deficit deal.
Well, number one, what actually happened in the deficit deal, and I am a Democrat who used to work for Democratic leaders. I was an early Obama supporter. What happened was the president surrendered. The Democrats surrendered. They gave in on almost everything, number one. And what that meant was we ended up with a deficit deal that in the long term doesn't cut enough because they won't tax the wealthy. They won't ask the wealthy to make a contribution. The wealthy Americans in this deficit agreement and in the entire financial crisis are doing literally zero. And what that means is the deficit is going to be that much higher because they're not paying taxes, and we have major companies that literally make billions of dollars of profit, pay no taxes, and then while they have billions of dollars, in fact $2 trillion of capital right now that the major companies are sitting on, they're hoarding it, they're still laying off workers to make their earnings go up so they can increase their compensation. The other thing that went wrong with this deal was simply that there was nothing to support jobs or to create jobs, which I thought was an absolute disgrace. Now, my view is, and I'm not just speculating, the White House politically is largely decided, and I've opposed this privately and publicly, to surrender many times to the House Republicans and to the Tea Party because they don't think they can win, and they're wrong about that, but that's what they believe, and the president thinks wrongly, in my view. He can appeal in the election to political independence by telling the American people that he's not a real Democrat, that he's not a real liberal. So what happened in the negotiations last time, and I could take 10 hours and go through all of the different deals that weren't made and all the times the Republicans said no, is in the end, when the pressure was on at the 11th hour and the 59th minute, the Republicans said what Michael Corleone said, we're offering you nothing, and the president agreed, and the Democrats in the House and Senate agreed, and I'm actually somebody that believes that Republican economics is bad. Now, if you agree with me on that, you'll see that this deal is bad, and we can look at what's happened since then. Only bad news in the economy since that deal was made, and the stock market has gone down close to 1,000 points since that deal was made. We are in a global class war. It involves Asia, Europe, the U.S., where the wealthy are making the profits. Everyone else is feeling the pain, and that is disastrous economics, whether it's Europe, Japan, or the United States. And we have to get a political system where people that have the money don't buy special breaks by giving the money to the politicians, where they're all Michael Corleone, but the 99% of the American people who are hardworking and law-abiding and good Americans, they're getting screwed every hour, every day, and right now, this minute, as we speak now.
Sal Landau, elaborate for that. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Dodo.
If I may come in.
Go ahead.
The rich people themselves are so careless that they're trying to destroy the entire system. As we speak now, the FAA has no budget. Now, the FAA is the one that regulates the air for them to use their executive jets. They've all gone on holiday without giving the FAA a budget. And they are doing other things like that as well. Last week...
I'm sorry, you're talking about the federal aviation... are you talking about the federal aviation industry? Is that FAA, is that what your reference there?
Yes, the Federal Aviation Authority.
Okay, go ahead.
The Federal Aviation Authority is just a symptom to show you how completely disorganized the whole thing is.
Well, and if I may come in,
everything.
And if I may come in to bring in Sal Landau to explain to us, Sal Landau, based on this income inequality that our guests here are pointing towards. Some are saying that it's actually a criminal act committed by the U.S. government when people on a weekly or monthly basis commit part of their paycheck that's supposed to go for Social Security and other welfare benefits that they are obviously entitled to when they retire, that they're not going to ever get that. And that's indeed a criminal act by the U.S. government. Explain that to us, and also how bad will the quality of life in the United States get based on the way it's moving forward, this debt deal being one of those motions?
Well, I think the real criminality of this is the ignoring of the reality that is pressing upon us. As all throughout the world, we are recognizing climate change as a very, very basic threat to future civilized life on this planet. The first thing that got cut was the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, and funds that are going in to deal with climate change. So that was not just ignored, it was scoffed at. The second thing, I mean, it was talked about what is really behind all of this war, this class war, the war against the poor, the working people, the middle class. This is a war essentially designed to reduce the socially necessary cost of labor. This is what's happening. You have 25 million or more people unemployed in this country. That's officially 25 million, but there are many more. Many people have been thrown out of their homes. The amount of homeless people on the street has grown. People are hungry in the United States, and they are simply talking about we can't afford to tax the really rich because they're the ones who are going to create jobs, as if they never have and they never will. They're buying bracelets and they're repainting their yachts. Well, that will absorb a little bit of labor, but not really much. So what we're really facing in this country, people say we're living beyond our means. Well, we have a health care system that is beyond stupid. When you have health insurance companies that do nothing but obstruct health care, that is, if many people who are really sick can't get treatment because the insurance companies don't allow it because they don't want to pay for it. That's really stupid. We have a so-called defense budget that doesn't defend us. It's almost $1 trillion a year if you add in atomic weapons and all of the wars we're fighting. And all these wars essentially simply create more enemies for the country. We have 800 bases around the world. What are they for? Nobody really knows anymore. We have NATO. This was an organization that was designed to contain the Soviet Union, which stopped existing 20 years ago. So we are living in a state of denial. I said it before, and that's it. It's stupidity and denial, and it is catastrophic, and it does spread its vibrations throughout the world in terms of economic instability. And there doesn't seem to be either the will or the courage in this country for any key leader to grab a hold. I think one of my colleagues pointed out that the object of the Republicans is to prevent Obama from becoming president for a second term. They don't have any other objectives. This whole Tea Party movement, this extreme right, capitalized on the anger of certain sectors of the American public, but it was financed by two Wisconsin billionaires who had their very own agenda. And who knows, it may be selling short on the dollar. I don't know. But we are now in an absurd situation. And we are, in a sense, the public is demanding action from the president. It's seeing none. It's demanding action from the Congress, and it's getting none there either.
I get a feeling, Sal Landau, by your statements that perhaps Republicans want to see somewhat the United States teetering on almost a double-dip recession. Obviously, the reports coming out just before this broadcast, U.S. stocks plunged due to the weak U.S. economy. Brent Budowsky, do you see it as such, the Republicans, based on the 2012 elections coming up, using this as a way to obviously not have Obama be reelected?
Yeah, there's no question about it. The Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, publicly said his number one goal is to defeat the president, not to create jobs and not to help the economy. I mean, that is an incredible thing for any political leader to say. Now, I would add that the House Republicans with the Tea Party people, they may be cutting their own throats. And I think there's a good chance that the Democrats can gain control of the House of Representatives back. The mood of the public right now is they are against whoever is in. They are madder than you know what about everyone who holds office today. So the policies of the Republican Party in the House may end up destroying themselves while they're trying to destroy the president. These are all part of global patterns. There are European problems. I'm profoundly worried right now that the crisis in Southern Europe will soon go to Northern Europe, working its way up. Now we're about to see Spain and Italy have some of the problems as well. I'm an alumni of the London School of Economics, and we have wonderful programs that I support to help poor people from around the world who are brilliant in countries and places listening to this show be able to afford to go to the London School of Economics because the university cares about them and will finance that. I am now getting desperate emails as an alumni to give them more money because the British government of Mr. Cameron is cutting spending dramatically in ways that are just as bad as the Republicans here, in my opinion, unwise, and part of the same global phenomenon of the rich and the wealthy and the people at the top declaring class war against the 99% at the bottom. What we need, I've said this before, to answer this global war against everyone else, what we need is an Arab Spring, an American Spring, a European Spring, a British Spring, a Japanese Spring. All of the people who want a better world have to rise up politically and demand it because the people at the top are the ones with the money, and either we force them to change or we'll all be poor.
Let's continue with that notion, the spring notion there, Cameron Dodo, in terms of Brent Budowsky. Give us a reaction there. Pretty strong statement coming for there to be pretty much a spring all around the world, aside from what's happening in the Middle East.
Well, the American populace is a very interesting one. It believes that it has free media, which will give it the information upon which it can act. But this analysis that we get in here is not going to them. They voted the Tea Party into Congress to do what? To destroy the basis of American welfare completely. And yet, maybe they will vote for them again because across America, you have these rabid right-wing radio stations which are all pumping the idea that it is Obama, 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 Obama. And it is only skin deep because much of that right-wing rhetoric comes from racism. They don't want a black president, but they dare not say that, so they are trying to do it through the economy. Mm-hmm. And the trouble that I find very disappointing is that the liberals don't understand the trouble that the conundrum or the dilemma in which Obama finds himself. Obama's instincts are to say, I want welfare enacted because a lot of black people are poor. Mm-hmm. There are more poor black people in America than white poor people. Medicaid, unemployment affects them more than anybody else.
Right.
But the moment he does that and begins to show that he's, quote, a black president, unquote,
okay,
they will destroy him with the media.
Well, let me come in. Let me come in since we're running short of time. I apologize. Get a reaction from Sal Landau.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. Yeah. The liberals don't understand the dilemma, and they think that it is because Obama is a conservative that he is not active. But if you take the program to Congress and they shout it down, and their election will not come until a year later, what do? The people have destroyed the bipartisan arrangement by which all American presidents have ruled.
Right. And China's been looking at this. And Sal Landau, quick answer from you. They have actually, the top credit rating agency there has downgraded U.S. credit rating. Now, one of the reasons was the credit rating agency said was the squabbling between the two political parties, which reflected an irreversible, as they said, trend on the U.S.'s declining ability to repay its debts. If I can have a reaction from you on that in 30 seconds or less, please.
I think the United States will not have a problem repaying its debt for reasons given previously, that it can essentially sell the bonds. The point, I think, is that what this country had in the 1930s was a president with great will and determination who was willing to try things. And most important, he was able to do that because there was a mass movement underneath him, a labor movement, a movement of poor people that supported him. And that's what we need in this country. We've got to get the people away from their computer screens and their television sets and stop wringing their hands and get out into the streets as the people did in Wisconsin to answer this movement.
I'm so sorry,
to the right.
I have to cut you because we just ran out of time. Thank you so much, Sal Landau there from Berkeley. I'd like to thank Brent Budowsky and also Cameron Dwaru, who gave us the statements from London. And thank you, the viewer, for watching. Send us your questions to newsroom@presstv.ir. From me, Kaveh Taqvi, and the entire team, it's goodbye.